Natalia, are you ready? Good morning, kia ora, and good morning, everyone. I'd like to open the Play, Recreation and Sport Committee meeting this morning for the 16th of December. First off, I'd like to explain that the meeting has been recorded and will be on the Council's website, and it's also being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. First off, I'd like to explain the health and safety requirements for the Council chamber, shown on the screen in front. We haven't got any members of the public, but I'm sure you all know what will happen if we do have a health and safety emergency. We will follow Natalia or Hannah out if we do have an emergency. Just if we do have a presenter in the room, which we will have under finance and we will have under play, sport and rec, we must ensure that they do say their name when they are giving their speaking rights, because it is being recorded. First off, I'd like to call for apologies for play, sport and rec. Councillor Johnson.
I would like to put in apologies on behalf of Janine Rankin.
But we've got George here, so George is good.
Good.
Thanks, George. Councillor Finlay. Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Apologies from the Mayor today, and apologies from myself for early departure.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
And late arrival.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that looks like it's it for us today. We will look to move those apologies, seconded by Councillor Meehan. We'll look to vote. So I'm the mover, and Councillor Meehan is the deputy mover. Look, are these working today? We're not quite ready. Just wait, Councillor Finlay, they're just waiting.
You lead it off, Laura. Go on.
Right, you can vote now.
Oh, no, he doesn't vote for this one.
Yeah.
He's not on it.
And that has passed 100%. Just before we adjourn this meeting, I just want to say one interesting fact for the day. It's 31 years today on Friday that this chamber was opened. Just thought we'd give you one interesting fact for the day. Thank you for that. Now we'll adjourn to the finish of the Finance and Audit Committee, so we'll see you then.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Harpeta, and I will now open the Finance and Audit Committee meeting of the 16th of December. And first up, I will take apologies. And apologies from the Mayor.
And apologies from me for early departure, depending on what time we conclude.
And Councillor Rutherford for early departure. Councillor Finlay? Okay. And Councillor Finlay, early departure. Yep. Okay, are there any other apologies? Okay, I'll move the apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just to clarify, sorry, I did say it should be Deputy Mayor Rutherford, not Councillor, and the apologies. Okay, we'll vote. And that is carried unanimously. I'm not aware of any additional items. Are there any declarations of interest? Not aware of any. We'll move on to item number 4. There's no public comment. I'm not aware of any, and there's no one here. So we'll now move on to item number 5, which is confirmation of the minutes. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? I'm happy to move the minutes. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Naylor. There are no comments. We will go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. We will now move on to item number 6, which is the Palmerston North Airport Limited Statement of Expectations, and we have Steve Patterson presenting. Ready when you are, Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair and councillors. I think I heard Councillor Harper to say 31 years ago. In fact, it was 41 years ago, because I was sitting here in the meeting 41 years ago when it was opened. So 1979 would have been the meeting date. So I'm trying not to show my age, but it was an interesting meeting, there's no question, in 1979, 41 years ago. Now, in terms of what we're here to talk about on this occasion is this statement of intent, the statement of expectations for the airport company. And as you'll be aware, there isn't a legislative requirement for such a statement, but there was a new section introduced to the legislation which talks about statements of expectation, and we have such things for our other CCOs that we've been preparing for a while. And it has become established sort of best practice to have a statement of expectation as part of that accountability cycle for CCOs. And so this is an attempt to have a first one for the airport. As a trading entity with the directors we have and the nature of the business in the past, we've attempted to have, and we continue to have, reasonably arm's length interactions with the company, but it's important that we have clear expectations for them about how the council as shareholder feels they should set the scene for us in terms of preparing their statements of intent. So I guess, as I said, I've had an attempt at preparing such a first up one for the company. I've had a bit of a look around the countryside to see what sorts of statements there have been for other airports to just get a bit of a model for what types of things are important to other shareholders around the countryside, and grabbed some bits from various ones of them that I thought were important for us. Part of the process that I've used each year for the company is to prepare an administrative document that I've sent to them every year in advance of this, which has been more about the process and when the council's going to be considering various things, which committee meetings, when we expect them to turn up, and that sort of style of thing, as opposed to direction about the things that they should be taking into account in terms of strategy and the like when preparing the statement. So this expands and the sorts of things that that we've interacted with them about at this time of the year in the past. I think, as I see this particular one as a first up attempt, and in future that we'll build on this with experience and see how it goes, is my suggestion to you. So any questions, I'll take.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve. Just my questions are around, I suppose, the relationship side of this. So has the airport been contacted, and have we explained that there's going to be a change in process?
Yes, I have dealt with the airport company and provided them with a copy of a first draft to have a look through. They haven't formally considered it in a sense, but they've had an ability to read it and make some comments back to me. So that's been done at the chief executive level as opposed to the board level.
Okay. Because for other organisations, we have often had consultation between the two governance groups, or a workshop, or, you know, there's been some governance to governance discussion before the statement of expectations is produced, whereas this seems to have just come a little bit out of left field, and I'm just wondering how,
Yes.
you know, are you confident that about how it's going to be received? Are we happy that we've got it,
Yes.
you know, that we're on the right page here?
I appreciate that in an ideal world we might have had some further interaction at a governance-to-governance level first. In view of the time that was sort of available to us to get that to work, I couldn't really make it work this year in that way, and so I decided that we'd prepare it in the form that I've done and interact with them, having prepared as a draft to see how, at least at an officer level, the chief executive level, they felt about it. I'm reasonably happy that it will be received in the spirit in which it's intended, and that there won't be undue consequences if it stays roughly in the same form as what we've got at the moment. But then if we choose to change it significantly, who knows how it would be received then.
So, and just the last one, Madam Chair, just on reading of it, it doesn't seem to set out anything that we wouldn't have had an expectation of anyway. Is that your understanding? That
well,
it's
that's the
more
way
stating the current situation than introducing anything new?
It's true. I think post-COVID, I guess there's been more pressure on the airport. Life's been more difficult for them than what it was previously, and they were able to accomplish a lot more in recent years than what they feel that they can do right now. So I suppose in some respects there is room for more pressure for there to be differences of opinion and differences of objectives from the council about the way in which they're doing things, or the speed with which they're doing things, than what there might have been in the past. And the directors of the company, I know, have particular legislative things that they have to take account of in terms of solvency and the like, that they're pretty conscious of. And so from that perspective, I suppose there is a risk of there to be a difference of opinion developed between the council and the company about the speed with which things are done. But I think provided we continue to work together in the way in which we have, I can't see that should be a problem, and that we should be able to work forward. As I said, in terms of developing my aim in trying to get it before you at this time in the cycle now was just to sort of start in the process and to use this as something that more or less replicates what we're doing at the moment, but is an opportunity in the future to perhaps build in a governance-to-governance discussion at a time of the year that would suit the process. I know that there has been a sort of an ability in the past at a time of the year that doesn't really suit this cycle for there to be an interaction, and so we need to move that if it's going to become part of it, I think.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Steve. Just on page 17, where we lay out the specificities of the various different expectations, when I read through that, I see in each paragraph it does tend to use the word expect. And the exception to that is the paragraph around environmental impacts, where the language changes to encourage. And just wondered, in your view, why we should be changing language around environmental performance relative to others?
Wasn't a conscious change of thrust on my part. It was perhaps I didn't consciously want that to be any different from the rest. It might have been just the words I was thinking about at the time. So if you want that changed, then...
Great, that's helpful, Madam Chair.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Steve, for sharing this report. It might be my understanding, but on page 18, when you are describing the objectives, at one point it says that increasing tourism expenditure. It's one of the, objectives. Is it increasing tourism expenditure or increasing income or something else? It's a 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph.
I'm not sure. I guess in terms of what we'd expect, we'd hope that tourism would increase, that tourists would increase their expenditure in the region, I guess, is what we're trying to point to, if that's not quite.
And it gives a sense to me that we are making it less affordable. If we are making it expensive, increasing expenditure means we are making it less affordable.
Yeah, no, it's not meant to be saying that. I think it's what it's trying to say is, and if it's not clear, we can change the words. We're expecting them to provide an environment where tourists would be spending more in our patch, basically, so increasing tourism expenditure.
Yeah, could it, through you, Madam Chair? Yes, I think Steve's exactly right. This wasn't intended to be nothing but trying to encourage the airport to encourage, for instance, airlines, more flights, to encourage more tourists to come here. I'm sorry, there was no intention of it being anything apart from that, and I'm reread it a couple of times. I'm not sure. I can see what you're seeing, but then maybe I'm looking at it through a different lens.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve, for this report. My question is really around the use of the descriptor healthy balance sheet on page 17. And I just wanted to understand better what you had in mind and what engagement you're trying to encourage with that terminology.
Yes, it's not a term that I'd normally use, I have to admit, and it was one I've flogged from someone else when I saw from another council. But in terms of a healthy balance sheet, I guess we've expected that the company will have a particular debt equity ratio in terms of the amount of borrowing that they would engage, and we've, in the statement of intent, they do express that as a ratio, and so that would be what I'd expect is one of the things that we'd take into account and that they...
Do you think it might be better worded as an expectation for appropriate financial risk policies, or suitably prudent financial risk policies might result in a better engagement on those particular issues?
Yeah, potentially, yes. Mm.
Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Madam Chair, and thanks, Steve. Just for a little bit of clarity, Steve, when was this shared with the Chief Executive at PNAL?
About 3 weeks ago.
And was any feedback received, and has that been incorporated to the document, or is this basically your...
No, there were no... There might have been the odd word change, but nothing substantive changed at all in terms of the feedback. He was happy enough with what I'd written.
So once this has been adopted by Council, it then becomes the official version?
It does, yes.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Denison.
Madam Chair, I have tried to come out of the queue a couple of times, but it seems not to work.
That's fine, we'll take you out then. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Steve. Just wanted to ask again around the research you did around other councils. How many other councils did you look at in terms of what kind of statement of intents that they were using?
For airports, there was about 4 of them.
Were they similar to our?
Yeah, regional types of airports, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions, councillors? No. So thank you very much, Steve. You may step down. And we will now go to the recommendations. I'm adding another one just to give editing rights of the chair. This will take into consideration Mr Armstrong's alterations, so then we don't have to go through several amendments. And it's not changing the context of the document, it's just rewording. So if Councillor Barrett, you've got an amendment, so you're moving the 3 recommendations, so I'll let you speak and you can explain your...
Thank you, Madam Chair. So overall, I think this is a good approach to be taken with the airport in terms of opening up communications in this way, and obviously other councils around the country are taking a similar approach. So broadly happy with what we're doing here, broadly comfortable with what is in the statement, because I think that it simply reflects the direction of travel. The one amendment that I do have, seconded by Councillor Dingwall, is around being clear that this is a statement of expectations. It's not a statement of encouragement, it's a statement of expectations, and changing that language from encouraging carbon neutrality to expecting progress toward carbon neutrality, I think is actually quite consistent with the activity of the airport. They've been on that journey now for some years, and I don't see this as being an issue for them. I see it simply as being clarity in communication, so I'd ask you to support that, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just note to members that this is not an amendment to the this is the stantive. I've made it the full stantive, so it's now we'll take. Yep. Yes. Are you comfortable that we take item number 3 as well, fully?
Yep.
And the seconder, Councillor Dingwall. Okay. So are there any questions, Councillor Johnson?
I did want to make a comment overall, but I just had a question about your last statement when you said it wasn't, if I heard correctly, you said that recommendation 2 wasn't an amendment to the statement of expectation?
No, sorry, what I was saying is I didn't take it as an amendment. It's part of the substantive motion rather, yes.
Sorry, yeah, no,
sorry
I
if I wasn't clear.
I do have an overall comment to make at the appropriate time. Are we taking all 3 together?
Yes, I'll take all 3 together.
So I can make that comment?
Yes, you may.
So just the only comment I really want to make around this is just around process and around preserving relationships. And I think we just do need to be careful when we change what we do with a CCO, that we have appropriately done the soft stuff, you know, actually told people that this is coming, explained to them why we think it's a good idea. You know, for preference, we would have had some governance to governance interaction over this. And so I just am sounding a little note of caution. I mean, I'm reassured by the officer that this isn't going to ruffle any feathers. But I do think it is very important that we retain good relationships with our CCO boards and their CEs. And my preference would have been that there was a little more of a kind of consultation and a governance to governance level over this, so that we could feel confident that we're not just sending a letter, a cold letter in the post, for them to open and be a bit shocked at. So that's my only note of caution about this. And having heard what the officer has said, I feel that it's okay to go ahead with this. But I think it's worth noting for the future, not only for the airport, but for all our CCOs, that we should be dealing in a way that we ourselves would like to be dealt with, which is, you know, giving people a heads up and having a chat before we actually put a letter in the post. Thanks.
Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No problems with the recommendations in regards to the statement of expectation. I was just on recommendation 3. Typically, we've had it in the past that it's the chair and deputy, and I'd like to move an amendment unless it's supported by the mover and seconder. I think it's a better process if we don't rely on one person to make the amendments on final documents like this, and I think it protects you, but it also protects us as a council if we do have both the chair and deputy. That was just the point I wanted to make. Thank you.
No, we'll just, I'm happy to change that if the, and councillor Dingwall, yep, we'll just do that. Good point, councillor. I'd just like to make a final comment, and I agree with councillor Johnson, and had the airport not really, you know, the airport are doing everything that's in that letter of expectation, so I'm comfortable to approve it, but I totally agree with councillor Johnson that we should have had the better engagement, but understand in this year why it hasn't been done. So we'll now move to vote, and we're taking all three together. And that is carried unanimously. Well, just before we move on to item number 4, my apologies, introduce Fiona Dredge, who's just replacing Stuart while he's on sick leave. So, sorry, I forgot to acknowledge you, Fiona, so that's why Fiona's sitting there. And we now move on to item number 7, which is on page 21, and that's the 21-22 Business Assurance Plan. And we have Masuma presenting, so ready when you are, Masuma.
Good morning, everyone. I am pleased to present to you a proposed business assurance plan for the next 18 months today. If I may take your attention to page 31 in the first instance, I would like to begin by giving you an update on the previous 18-month plan that we had in place. You'll notice that 2 of the reviews have been completed and a further 2 are in progress, so they're just about completed and should be reported to you at your next meeting. Now, there were 4 reviews that were delayed due to various reasons, but genuine reasons, I would say. However, you will note that what I have done is carried them forward into the new plan so that we don't lose sight of them. Heading to pages 29 and 30, that's where you'll find the new proposed plan for the next 18 months. Try to give you as much detail as I can, but however, I guess at this stage it is an indicative scope. Until we do more planning and actual scoping, we won't know what's exactly included in those reviews and what's not. But otherwise, happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Masuma. Are there any questions, councillors? Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question, Masuma, thank you for the report. Is there a budget set for this activity for the year?
Yes.
And what is that budget?
We've, the LTP is of course yet to be approved, but I understand that the Chief Financial Officer has made some budget in there.
Okay, so related to that question on budget, is this work undertaken with a combination of external or internal resource, or is it all? For example, there's a health and safety review. Is that externally or internally carried out?
The health and safety in particular would be externally because it is quite a technical review, but most of the others would either be fully in-house or in a co-sourced engagement with an external.
Thank you. So then, following on from that, what's the process to kick things in and out of the review? Were there any particular items that were put forward at ELT that aren't covered in here?
I do not believe that there would be anything. So the process which I undertook was I discussed with each of the ELT members what their top risks were and how we could address them through different reviews. So we have tried to address each of the risks that they raised. So I do not believe there was anything key or significant that we haven't included in the proposal.
So this links into the risk planning process and is informed by that process?
We, at the moment, have a risk policy in place, but our risk framework itself is in draft. So in its absence, I have opted to discuss with the ELT and the Head of Risk and Resilience to understand where those risks are.
And during the year, when you're engaging on this plan, what sort of process do you have for reprioritising, delaying or seeking additional resources?
So basically, every quarter, I'd review the plan itself and see if we are in a position to undertake those reviews. If we aren't, then I'd start having those discussions with the ELT and the chair around what we can do in that regard. But circumstances...
The chair of this committee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms Emma, for the report. I just had a question about the reports that, the previous list of reviews, and whether or not they will be prioritised in the new list, because what I would be a bit nervous about is something like, for example, asset management planning review. Didn't happen last time. It's carried forward to this one. Something else is done, and then it's carried forward to the next one. So is there a process for prioritising the reviews that weren't able to be completed in the last round?
At the moment, I haven't put the reviews, then the timeframe is not based on priority, rather convenience. So it's been based on the needs of the business as well, because asset management planning team is currently very busy with LTP. So that's why the timeframe was set according to them as well, so that they do have that time to invest in this review. But at the same time, it is only a proposal and the timeframe can be shuffled. So if you guys need more assurance on something in particular and you'd like to bring it forward, then we can, or of course, take that feedback.
That was just an example. I think I'd be keen to know what checks are in place to make sure that a review doesn't just get passed from cycle to cycle without ever being done, if you follow me.
No, absolutely. At the moment, I've carried it forward and indicated which those were, so that you guys are aware which of those have been brought forward. I'm not sure what additional information you'd need or what checks you'd like to see that we can undertake.
I suppose in terms of reporting, it might be helpful the next time you report to us if we have if we have a column for the date when the review was originally proposed, and that way we can track whether something is just getting passed along the line and never actually being done.
If I can also interrupt, Councillor, once we've approved this, all these items will be going on the work schedule. So we will have eyesight, councillors will have eyesight on them.
Okay, because, sorry, but the previous ones weren't on the work schedule?
No, but I wasn't involved in that. So from now it's a sort of a new process. So my plan is we can't put them on the work schedule till we've approved this.
Okay.
And then they'll go on the work schedule and we'll be, as I say, have eyesight of them.
So the tracking will be through the work schedule?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
And also the reports as well, yeah. Any further questions? Councillor Butt. Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are there any further questions? Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report. Just on page 27, one of the things that are considered in that list of bullet points are previous reviews, and other than the last 18-month list that you've gone through, do we have a list anywhere that we can see what reviews have been done historically and how long ago?
Do you mean through the previous internal audit division?
Yeah.
There may be. I haven't looked at that stuff, obviously, because I came into the business assurance part of it, so I'm not sure, but we could probably have a look for you.
Yeah, thank you. That's all, thanks.
There appears to be no further questions. So thank you, Ms Suma. You may step down. So we will now go to the recommendations. There's two recommendations. I'm happy to move. To have a seconder, Councillor Naylor. Are there any comments? Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really comfortable with this process that's been put in place. And obviously, as it gets further refined, I think what would be useful is having a historical understanding that helps inform the prioritisation of what pieces of work are going to happen in the future. And where there are more pieces of work that are identified than what can be accomplished in that 18 months. It's quite good to see how long it's been since a review's been done, and perhaps look at how those items are prioritised to help inform future planning as well.
Just to follow on as a comment, I'm probably the opposite. I think we've got enough information, and if you actually want to go through, if councillors want to have a look, if you go through all the previous audit reports, there's a full schedule of all the processes that have been audited. Each triennium we've had at the beginning of each audit meeting, we've had a set piece of work of all the audits, and councillors have had input into that process. So probably if you go into files, you'll be able to find them easily. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also support the recommendation, and I think it's an excellent start. My comments, though, are I get the sense that we're relatively new in terms of moving forward through this, and sometimes I think when we're thinking about business assurance, it's helpful to take a step back and at a much higher level think about where it fits, what the objectives are. So, for example, how does this function leverage and work off the risk process that is in place in the organisation, and how does it get informed and set priorities through that process? I think would be a useful thing to be very clear on. Just in terms of basic objectives, some businesses have a very sharp, narrow focus on eliminating fraudulent activity, ensuring financial delegations are clear, and very important business hygiene stuff. Others are broader in their scope and look at opportunities to improve the business. And I'm not sure exactly where we are and what our objectives are around that. And sometimes they change over time, and you sort of start somewhere and move forward. So those are things to think about. I think it's also very useful when you're thinking about this sort of thing to be very clear on the roles that the bits and pieces or the key people in the organisation are playing. So CEO, leadership team, Audit and Risk Committee, Chair of the Audit Committee, and just how those bits and pieces all fit together in terms of clarity on function, who decides the scope, etc., etc. So some of the questions that Councillor Naylor was bringing forward are really questions around, well, how does that work and where does that decision lie? So there's probably many other things, but I think it would be useful to take a step back and, if anything, come up with almost a policy statement of where this function fits and how it relates and the important moving parts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. And Councillor Denison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess to bring some light to this was very intentional to split the business assurance and the risk management in the last term of council, and as the previous chair of Audit and Risk was involved with the process probably more closely than other members, and have a real confidence that the leadership team and the CE had quite robust sessions on this and fleshing out the priority and the makeup. And probably the context hasn't come through in this report, but I just want to give my assurance that from my involvement as the previous chair, that it was pretty robust and outlined very clearly. And so that would probably be all I wanted to say. As far as the policy statement goes, that I'm not sure of, but the priorities that would come out of the internal audits in the past have been intentionally split, and I think the Chair covered that summary report very well, but I just wanted to say this is quite intentional. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denison, and I'd just like to wrap up by saying that at any stage through this committee, if there's anything that we want to reprioritise or change, that we have the power within this committee to do that. So we have those options if we see something with higher priority coming through. So that's the end of comments, so we will go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. We now move on to item number 8, which is the Business Assurance Accountability Report, and that's again presented by Ms. Suma, and that's page 33.
Morning again. This time I've got the accountability report for the recommendations that have so far come to the Finance and Audit Committee whilst the Business Assurance Division has been set up. Managed for each of these statuses, the management have indicated whether it was in progress, not started or completed. Where they indicated completed, that's when I did some further work and verified that it has been completed. And if I couldn't verify it, then I changed it back to in progress, of course. Those that have been indicated as completed will not be reported going forward, but basically this is telling you that it's now done, so you don't need to maintain oversight any longer. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Suma. Question for myself. These ones that are overdue, have we got timelines and updates from the areas of, because they've been there since 2017 and it just says in progress overdue, so that's like 3 years ago.
So those are the Audit NZ ones you're talking about in particular?
Yes.
Yes, so I think with our change in the financial system, they will be reprioritised as soon as that is completed, is my understanding. Unless the acting CFO would like to add anything, no.
Okay. So next finance meeting, would we be able to have an update on these particular ones so that they just don't sit on a report, so that we can have clarification? Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Suma. Just a question, probably along similar lines around the timeline. So I'm looking just at page 37 where you've got the Audit New Zealand final report recommendations. You've got when the matter was raised and then the status, so the date of origin. There isn't any particular due date around those, but then when you move down to page 40, the date of origin is replaced then with the due date, and so there's a little bit of mismatch around being able to track actually how long some of these things are taking, where the date of origin is versus the due date for different aspects. And I'm just wondering if future reports would be possible to have both of those included.
Absolutely.
And then just the process for, I guess, a question around your process for following up overdue items. How does that work internally? Because obviously some of these that had been there for quite a significant period of time, there's only so many reminder emails you can send to actually get action. So what's your process to sort of actually see traction on some of those?
I basically can only, as you say, chase and ask. If work isn't being progressed, then I do escalate to the next level. So say if it was a tier 4 or 5, then I'll take it to the next tier, and then ultimately to ELT and Finance and Audit, of course, as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, won't surprise you to hear my questions are also along the same lines of some of these outstanding items. So, Masima, you answered Councillor Beattie by saying that you thought that the renewal of the financial management system would deal with quite a number of these. But just to pick an example, succession planning for road assessment and maintenance management database, a succession plan be put in place to ensure the senior engineer's knowledge of the RAM system is passed on to other staff members. That doesn't seem to me to have any relation to the financial management system, and that's again one of these ones that prior to 2017. So I'm struggling to know what the issue might be for some of these. Is it a resourcing issue? Is it a prioritising issue? I just don't know if you're able to assist.
Is there someone able to assist, Masima?
Through you, Madam Chair, that we're going through looking at succession planning for all our hard to recruit and our high risk areas and infrastructure, this being one of them.
Well, I accept that, but this has been at least 3 years in the waiting, and I'm struggling to know, well, if someone can tell me that there's anything that can be done to speed this up, rather than it just sitting there, because if this person were to leave, then we'd be in trouble, is my understanding. I'd be interested to know what it's going to take to get these things off the list. I'll just leave it at that. No one's got an answer.
You're not responding? Okay. Okay, we'll leave it at that and you can comment if you require. Any further questions, Councillor?
No, thank you. I'll leave it for comment.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Masima, for the report. Just, you describe when things get marked as completed that you take them through a validation process. Could you just shed a little light on what that actually means, maybe with an example?
Of course, yeah, it's obviously dependent on the recommendation itself, but if I was to look at, I can't see a completed, so if we went to the ozone replacement, for instance, there's a few completed there. So bringing a project manager on the steering committee from the vendor, then I'll just check if on the agenda item for that meeting, has that person has been attending, also maybe going to one of the meetings and observing if that person has been in that meeting. I mean, if it's about completing a document, checking if that document's actually live, has it been approved by the right people, and, you know, it depends on the recommendation, really.
So I guess I'm trying to understand then how much of the completion is around sort of ensuring that an activity's happened versus ensuring that it's been efficacious in terms of actually addressing whatever the underlying challenge is.
Absolutely. So when I go to check completion, I would go back to my records and see what was the risk at hand, what was the finding, and the work completed, has that actually addressed that matter for which it was raised.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A simple question, Masima. In terms of outstanding audit issues from whatever audit, how frequently is progress and the tabling of due dates occurring within the senior leadership team? Is it looked at monthly, fortnightly, or quarterly?
This is possibly the first one I've completed yet, so we are still on a journey to deciding what effective reporting would look like, but it would possibly be between quarterly and 6 monthly, but if there is something at higher risk, then more often.
Excuse me, CE would like to respond.
It's my intention that this will be on our monthly all-day ELT meeting. We have just initiated a monthly all-day meeting, and this will be on the agenda to keep focus on it.
Thank you. I think that what's measured is what's managed is measured, and vice versa. So the more visibility it gets in the business, the less likely things are to hang around, would be my assessment. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. On page 41, there's an item there that says seek an amendment to the meeting minutes in order to record ELT commitment of funding to the program. And I'm just wanting to understand what meeting minutes that's referring to. I don't quite understand that.
That was a recommendation that came from an external, but when I went to seek clarification from them around what exactly they were looking for, I explained that that's actually a decision that was approved at council, and so therefore that's why it's been marked as completed, because it wasn't, the amendment wasn't actually required.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Okay. Councillors, are there any further questions? There being none, thank you very much, Ms. Suma. You may step down. I am happy to move the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm now open for comments. Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I admit I've got a sense of frustration, I suppose, looking at this report. Since I've come onto council, there has been a continued difficulty in getting audit items addressed in a timely way. And obviously, some of the delay this year can be attributed to COVID factors, and some delay can be attributed to the financial management system changeover. I understand that. But nevertheless, there remain other items that just seem to sit on the schedule from year to year. I welcome the CE's comment that this will be looked at ELT on a regular basis, but I really think I should make it clear that we don't expect to have items from Audit New Zealand Audit sitting on the report for several years. Just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Are there any further comments? I'd just like to make one. Yes, I'm disappointed too that we have so many items sitting there from 3 years later, and it will be my expectation that next Finance and Audit meeting that we have a full report and progress on each of those items with a defined completion date, and that we can, as a committee, keep an eye on them as per the previous reports. So I'll make no further comment, but we will be monitoring this seriously. So we'll now go to vote. And that is carried unanimously. We now move on to item number 9, which is the work schedule. And as I've said before, we'll add all those business assurance timeframes onto the work schedule. Are there any comments about them? I'm happy to move the work schedule. Councillor Harpeter, are there any comments? Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, one thing that I was looking for following the last meeting, and I guess in a similar vein to the more recent discussion, is there were a number of outstanding and aged HSNE audit issues that we agreed or discussed needed to be addressed at our last meeting. So I was wondering if, and just wanted to confirm that we would get some reporting back on those outstanding issues when the next health and safety quarterly update is undertaken.
It's on the schedule for item number 6 in February 21, so we will apply the same rigorous checking of those
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wasn't sure if those items had been included in previous quarterly reports.
Yes, they will be.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, so we'll go to vote on the work schedule. And that is carried unanimously. Right, we will now move on to item number 10, which is the exclusion of the public. And that will be for items number 11 and 12 for the minutes of the Audit Committee meeting and a tender award. And that's for third-party confidential. So I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Are there any comments? We will vote. And that is carried unanimously. We'll just give the administration staff a couple of minutes to turn everything off before we